The jingle of the bell above the diner's door announced my arrival. I scanned the room, taking in the faded red vinyl booths and the faint aroma of stale coffee and greasy food. This was exactly the kind of place I'd been looking for, somewhere to blend in, to start over without drawing attention. "Just one?" The voice of the middle-aged waitress snapped me out of my thoughts. "Yes, please." I forced a polite smile. She led me to a booth by the window and handed me a laminated menu. "Take your time, hon." As she walked away, I let out a slow breath, trying to shake off the lingering unease that had followed me since leaving Boston. This was a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind. I had to make it work. The bell jingled again, and a man strode in, his confident gait instantly commanding attention. He caught my eye and flashed a smile that made my heart skip a beat. There was something disarmingly familiar about him, like a memory I couldn't quite place. "A new face in town, huh?" he remarked casually, sliding into the booth across from me. I tensed, my guard immediately rising. "Yeah, just moved here," I replied, forcing another smile. "What gave it away?" He chuckled softly, his piercing blue eyes studying me intently. "Oh, just a hunch. Small towns don't get many newcomers." "So, what's your name?" he asked, extending a hand. I hesitated for a moment before taking it. "Alice," I said reluctantly. "Alice Grant." "James," he nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "James Rivers." His grip lingered a beat too long, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more about me than he let on. I pulled my hand back, suddenly regretting my decision to come here. "So, Alice," James leaned back, his gaze never wavering, "what brings you to our little slice of paradise?" I swallowed hard, struggling to maintain my composure. "Just needed a change of scenery," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Ah, I see." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Well, let me be the first to welcome you. I have a feeling we're going to get to know each other real well." As he stood and walked away, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly he meant by that, and more importantly, how much did he already know about the life I was so desperate to leave behind. The next few weeks passed in a blur as I settled into my new life in the small town. I found a job at a local bookstore, relishing the peace and quiet it offered. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, seemed content with my desire to keep to myself. "You've got a real gentle way about you, dear," she remarked one afternoon as we restocked the shelves. "Not like most of the young folks these days." I smiled politely, grateful for her kindness but wary of getting too close. The last thing I needed was to let anyone in, to risk them uncovering the truth about my past. As the days went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I stepped out of my apartment, I half expected to see that familiar smirk, those piercing blue eyes studying me from a distance. James Rivers. Our encounter at the diner had left me deeply unsettled, and the fact that I hadn't seen him since only amplified my paranoia. Was he watching me, waiting for the right moment to make his move? Or was I just being paranoid, my past trauma clouding my judgment? One crisp autumn evening, as I was closing up the bookstore, the bell above the door jingled, and there he stood, hands in his pockets, that infuriatingly casual smile plastered across his face. "Well, well, if it isn't the mysterious Miss Grant," he drawled, sauntering toward me. "Working hard, I see." I tensed, my fingers tightening around the stack of books I was holding. "What do you want, James?" He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there. No need to get defensive. I'm just making conversation." "Well, I'm not really in the mood for conversation," I snapped, brushing past him toward the front counter. He followed close behind, his footsteps echoing in the empty store. "You know, you've been awfully hard to track down these past few weeks." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Track down? What are you talking about?" James leaned against the counter, his gaze boring into me. "Oh, come on, Alice. You didn't really think you could just disappear, did you?" My mouth went dry as the realization washed over me. He knew. Somehow he knew about my past, about the life I'd left behind in Boston. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Let's just say I'm a friend of an old acquaintance, and he's been very worried about you, Alice." I felt sick to my stomach, the walls closing in around me. This was it. My past had finally caught up with me, and there was nowhere left to run. My heart raced as James's words sank in. An old acquaintance? There was only one person that could mean Derek, my manipulative, controlling ex-husband who had made my life a living hell back in Boston. "You're working for Derek, aren't you?" I demanded, clenching my fists to hide the tremors running through my hands. James simply shrugged, that infuriating smirk never leaving his face. The man has deep pockets, and he's willing to pay handsomely to get what he wants. "And what exactly does he want?" I spat, feeling a surge of defiance rise within me. "Well, that should be obvious." James leaned in closer, his voice low and menacing. "He wants you back, Alice, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." A chill ran down my spine at the implication behind his words. Derek had always been possessive, convinced that I belonged to him, that he could control every aspect of my life. The thought of being dragged back into that nightmare was almost too much to bear. "Tell him he can go to hell," I growled, standing my ground. "I'm not going anywhere with him or his lackeys." James's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something else behind that casual facade. Anger, maybe even a hint of admiration. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that," he conceded. "But you're playing a dangerous game here, Alice." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, tossing it onto the counter between us. "Derek wanted me to give you these. Said you might need some convincing." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and felt the blood drain from my face. Inside were a stack of photos, candid shots of me going about my daily life here in this small town, shopping at the grocery store, walking to work, even standing outside my apartment building. Derek had been watching me, tracking my every move. "He's not going to stop, Alice," James said, his voice taking on a softer tone. "He's obsessed with you, and he's got the money and resources to make life very difficult for you if you don't cooperate." I looked up at him, my eyes brimming with tears of frustration and anger. "So, what? I'm just supposed to give in? Let him control me again?" James held my gaze for a long moment, and I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something else in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe? "Look, I'm just the messenger here," he said finally. "But if I were you, I'd think long and hard about what's really important. Because Derek Wallace doesn't take no for an answer." With that, he turned and walked out of the bookstore, leaving me alone with the weight of his words and the sickening realization that my past had finally caught up with me. That night, as I tossed and turned in bed, memories of my life with Derek came flooding back, unbidden. The way he had slowly but surely isolated me from my friends and family. The constant put-downs and criticisms, chipping away at my self-worth until I was a mere shell of my former self. And the rage, that terrifying white-hot rage that would flare up at the slightest provocation, leaving me cowering in fear. It had started out so innocently, like it so often does. Derek was charming and attentive, sweeping me off my feet with grand gestures and lavish gifts. But as the months went by, the cracks began to show, the possessiveness, the jealousy, the need to control every aspect of my life. "You're mine, Alice," he would growl, his grip tightening around my wrist until I winced in pain. "Don't you ever forget that." And I didn't. How could I, when every day was a constant reminder of the power he held over me? The threats, the intimidation tactics, the promises of what he would do if I ever tried to leave. But one night, after a particularly brutal outburst that left me bruised and broken, something inside me finally snapped. I couldn't live like this anymore, constantly walking on eggshells, fearing for my safety and my sanity. So I ran. I packed a bag and slipped out in the middle of the night, leaving behind the luxurious prison Derek had built for me. It wasn't easy. He had eyes and ears everywhere, people loyal to him and the wealth he commanded. But I was determined to start over, to build a life for myself far away from his reach. And for a few blissful weeks, I thought I had succeeded. I found a job, a place to live, and started to piece together the shattered fragments of my life. But then James showed up, shattering the fragile illusion of safety I had constructed. As the sun peeked through my bedroom curtains, I made a decision. I couldn't keep running, not anymore. If Derek wanted a fight, then that's what he would get. I would stand my ground and face him head-on, no matter the cost. With a newfound sense of determination, I threw back the covers and got dressed. There was someone I needed to see, someone who could help me take Derek down once and for all. The crisp autumn air stung my lungs as I made my way through the deserted park, my footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. This was it, the confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating. I had left James a terse message, demanding to meet on my terms. Surprisingly, he had agreed without argument. As I rounded the corner, I saw him sitting on a bench, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. He looked up as I approached, that infuriatingly casual smirk playing on his lips. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I want you to leave me alone, James, and I want you to tell Derek that I'm not going back. Not now. Not ever." He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by my bravado. "Is that so? And what makes you think either of us is going to listen to your demands?" "Because I have information," I blurted out, my heart pounding in my chest, information that could ruin Derek if it ever got out. That seemed to catch his attention. He sat up straighter, his gaze sharpening. "I'm listening." I took a step closer, my voice low and urgent. "Derek has been embezzling money from his company for years, funneling it into offshore accounts, using it to fund his lavish lifestyle and keep his mistresses happy." James's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. "I have proof," I continued, my confidence growing. "Bank statements, wire transfers, the whole 9 yards. If that information ever got out, it would destroy him." For a long moment, James was silent, considering my words. Then, to my surprise, he let out a low chuckle. "You've got balls, I'll give you that," he said, shaking his head. "But you really think Derek is going to let a little thing like embezzlement stop him? The man is obsessed with you, Alice. He'll stop at nothing to get you back." I clenched my jaw, refusing to back down. "Then I'll go public with the information. Let the world see the kind of man he really is." James leaned back, studying me with a newfound curiosity. "You know, when I first took this job, I thought you were just another spoiled rich girl running away from her problems. But now—" He trailed off, his gaze lingering on me. "Now I'm starting to think there might be more to you than meets the eye." Before I could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made us both turn. My heart stopped as a figure emerged from the tree line, a figure I knew all too well. Well, Derek drawled, his eyes cold and calculating as they fell on me. "Isn't this a cozy little reunion?" My heart pounded in my chest as Derek stepped out from the shadows, his expensive suit crisp and immaculate as always. Despite the chill in the air, I felt beads of sweat forming on my brow. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice shakier than I would have liked. Derek's lips curled into a condescending smile. "Is that any way to greet your husband, Alice? After all the trouble I've gone through to find you?" I flinched at the word husband, a bitter reminder of the chains I had so desperately tried to break free from. "We're not married anymore, Derek," I spat. "Not after what you did." His eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the monster that lurked beneath that polished exterior. "You're mine, Alice," he growled, taking a step closer. "You always have been, and you always will be. This little game of hide-and-seek ends now." I instinctively backed away, only to feel James tense beside me. To my surprise, he had risen to his feet, positioning himself between Derek and me. "I think the lady has made her position pretty clear," James said, his voice low and even. "She doesn't want anything to do with you." Derek's gaze flickered to James, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "Ah, yes, the hired help. Tell me, how much is my dear wife paying you to play the knight in shining armor?" James didn't rise to the bait. "This has nothing to do with money. Alice is her own person, and she has the right to make her own choices." For a long moment, the two men stared each other down, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, to my astonishment, Derek threw back his head and laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You really have no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" he sneered, turning his icy glare back to me. "Alice belongs to me, and I'll do whatever it takes to get her back." With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized what he was implying. Derek always had an ace up his sleeve, some leverage or damaging secret he could use to bend people to his will. "What is it this time, Derek?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What twisted game are you playing?" His smile was chilling. "Let's just say I have a little something that could make your life very, very difficult if you don't cooperate." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. But we can discuss that later. For now, I think it's time we went home, don't you? I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips as Derek's hand moved ever so slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something metallic peeking out from beneath his jacket. A gun. The world seemed to slow to a crawl as Derek's hand moved towards the gun tucked into his waistband. My heart hammered in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get as far away from this man as possible. But before either of us could react, James was on him, grabbing Derek's wrist and twisting it behind his back with a sickening crack. The gun clattered to the ground as Derek let out a howl of pain. "You son of a bitch," he spat, struggling against James's iron grip. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I'm dealing with a coward who threatens women with guns," James growled, his face contorted with fury. "A pathetic excuse for a man." With his free hand, Derek reached into his jacket, no doubt going for another weapon. But James was faster, delivering a vicious blow to Derek's midsection that doubled him over, wheezing. "Alice, run," James barked, his attention momentarily diverted. It was all the opening Derek needed. With a feral snarl, he wrenched himself free and lunged at James, the two men grappling viciously on the ground. I stood frozen, paralyzed by the brutal scene unfolding before me. "Go!" James shouted again, his voice strained as he fought to keep Derek at bay. "Get out of here!" Snapping out of my daze, I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the pavement as I fled the park. Branches scratched at my face and my lungs burned, but I didn't dare slow down, not until I had put as much distance between myself and Derek as possible. Finally, gasping for breath, I stumbled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, collapsing against the rough brick wall. My mind raced, replaying the events of the night over and over again. James had saved me. The man I had initially mistrusted, the one I thought was just another pawn in Derek's twisted game, had put himself in harm's way to protect me. And now, who knew what Derek was capable of doing to him? The thought made my stomach churn, and I knew I couldn't just leave him to face Derek's wrath alone. Not after what he had done for me. Stealing my resolve, I pushed off from the wall and made my way back towards the park, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. As I drew closer, I could hear the sounds of the struggle, grunts of exertion, the dull thud of fists connecting with flesh. And then, silence. I rounded the corner, and the sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. James lay motionless on the ground, a trickle of blood running from a gash above his eye, and standing over him, chest heaving, was Derek, his face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "Well, well," he sneered, turning his icy glare towards me. "Look who decided to come back." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at Derek, his face twisted into a sneer of triumph. James lay motionless on the ground behind him, and a wave of guilt and fear washed over me. This was all my fault. If I had just gone back with Derek like he demanded, none of this would have happened. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Derek spat, taking a menacing step towards me. "Had to go and play the hero. Try to take me down." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. What could I possibly say to reason with this man, this monster who had haunted my every waking moment for so long? "I'm done playing games, Alice," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You're coming home with me, one way or another." A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision caught my eye, and I turned to see James stirring feebly on the ground. Relief flooded through me. He was alive, at least for now. "Don't you dare touch her," James rasped, his words slurred as he struggled to push himself up. Derek let out a derisive snort. "Or what? You'll bleed on me some more." He turned back to me, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You see what happens when you defy me, Alice? When you try to run?" My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of this nightmare. I couldn't go back with him, not after everything he had put me through. But I couldn't bear the thought of anyone else getting hurt because of me either. That's when I remembered the envelope, the one containing all the damning evidence of Derek's criminal activities. With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled it out, holding it up for him to see. "You want me, Derek?" I said, my voice wavering slightly. "Fine, but first you have to destroy this." His eyes narrowed as he registered what I was holding. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" I countered, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. All that matters is what's inside, enough to bury you for good. For a long moment, Derek was silent, weighing his options. Then slowly he extended his hand. Give it to me. I shook my head defiantly. Not a chance. You destroy it first, then I'll go with you. No tricks. A muscle twitched in Derek's jaw, but he seemed to realize he had no other choice. With exaggerated care, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek silver lighter. Our eyes locked as he flicked it open, the tiny flame dancing in the evening breeze. After you, I said, nodding towards the envelope. Derek's lips curled into a sneer, but he did as I asked, touching the flame to the corner of the envelope. The papers inside caught fire instantly, and he dropped it to the ground, watching impassively as the evidence went up in smoke. There, he said, grinding the ashes beneath his heel. Now come along, like a good girl. I felt sick to my stomach, but I had no other choice. Squaring my shoulders, I started to move towards him, my heart heavy with dread. That's when I heard it, a faint ringing sound coming from the bushes nearby. Derek froze, his brow furrowing in confusion. Then, to my astonishment, a figure emerged from the shadows, holding up a sleek black phone. You really should be more careful with your secrets, Derek, a familiar voice rang out. You never know who might be listening. Mia?
Mommy, wake up quickly! I woke up to my daughter's voice. Still half asleep, I looked at my phone on the bedside table and saw that it was 2 a.m. in the middle of the night. What's wrong at this hour? Did you need to go to the bathroom? In response to my question, my daughter tearfully said,
Please, we have to escape from Dad.
Huh? Those shocking words completely woke me up. I glanced at the empty spot next to me and realized my husband wasn't there. What do you mean? Why do we need to escape from Dad?
Just hurry, we have to escape from here.
My daughter's face was dead serious. In her extraordinary state, I decided to trust her and immediately got up. I hurriedly packed our things, took my daughter's hand, and left the inn. Please stay tuned to witness the surprising truth and its conclusion. My name is Susan Kelly. I'm 37 years old. I'm a working mother raising children. I work for a major publishing company as an editor. I've been working hard as an editor since I was a fresh graduate. My husband's name is Stephen Irvin. We met through a matchmaking agency. With my busy job and unsuccessful relationships, I was looking for a man who understood my work. Stephen is a freelance systems engineer who works from home. Unlike me, he seemed to have plenty of free time.
Being an editor is so cool. I respect you.
He was a man of good looks and education, and he seemed like a godsend to me. Stephen and I started dating, weaving our way through busy work schedules for about a year. During that time, Stephen never complained about my work and always showed understanding. With this person, I can make it work. With that in mind, I agreed to Stephen's proposal. Thus, we became married. He diligently took care of household chores for me. A year after marriage, my pregnancy was confirmed. While I juggled work and pregnancy, my husband supported me diligently. And thus, our daughter Hannah was born. We worked together to raise Hannah. Our daughter is now in 2nd grade, already 8 years old. She's so cute and is the apple of our eye. One early morning, Hannah woke up and I called out to her. Good morning, Hannah. Is jam okay for your bread? Then Hannah says something like this.
Mom, this isn't the time for that. You should hurry up and get ready for work.
Huh? I only need to be at the office by 9 today, so we still have plenty of time, right?
No, I think it's better to take an earlier train than usual. Let's leave the house together.
Since Hannah insisted, I quickly got ready. Normally, I would see Hannah off and leave the house, but this time I left 28 minutes earlier than usual. I took one train earlier than usual to work that day. I drank coffee and prepared for the morning meeting. As a result, I realized there was an oversight in the documents that needed correction. It was a good thing I left early, as Hannah suggested. I thought as I hurried to make the corrections. However, even though it was time for the meeting, there was someone missing. He arrived about an hour late and received a scolding from the higher-ups. When I asked him about it later, he said he was late because the train had an emergency stop due to trouble. And I found out that it was the same train I usually take. Thanks to Hannah, I was able to attend the meeting on time and even make the meeting materials perfect. I felt grateful to Hannah in my heart. Actually, my daughter has this mysterious habit. Whenever she says something strange, if you ask her why, she always answers,
"Because I saw it in my dream."
She even once told me to take an umbrella because she predicted sudden rain. Hannah might have some sort of intuition. When I told my husband Stephen about it, he just laughed it off, but I believed her. One day, something unexpected happened. My husband Stephen suddenly told me something.
Hey, Susan. Actually, I've been really busy with work. I've been trying my best, but it seems like I've reached my limit.
Certainly during that time, my husband would often claim he had meetings, then head out, spending nights locked away in his office. What do you mean you've reached your limit?
I've been feeling exhausted and can only imagine pessimistic scenarios no matter what I do. When I went to the hospital, they diagnosed me with depression.
That's... With a solemn expression, Stephen conveyed this, and he continued speaking.
So I want to take a break from work for a while, like a recharge period, you know?
Yeah, that might be necessary too. Your health comes first.
Thanks for understanding. I'll take care of the household chores, so can I leave earning money to you?
Yeah. To be honest, I wanted Stephen to work too, especially considering Hannah's education expenses. But if he's diagnosed with a depression, it can't be helped. I decided to increase my overtime work and put even more effort into my job than before. Stephen didn't do any work after that and instead took care of the household chores. Then, perhaps intending to console me, he started offering me alcohol every night. Feeling pleased by his gesture, I drank it as my husband suggested. Due to fatigue and the effects of alcohol, I always ended up sleeping soundly on those days I drank. One day, as I returned home from work, Stephen said this to me.
Hey, how about a family vacation for the first time in a while?
Huh? A trip? Stephen handed me a brochure for a tourist destination by the sea. As I looked through it, I responded, That sounds nice. Since it's Hannah's summer vacation, it would be a good opportunity to make some memories, don't you think?
Yeah, it would be a good change of pace for me too. Then I'll make the arrangements.
Stephen said happily. If he's so energetic, I did think it might be time for him to start working, but I kept that thought to myself. It was around the time the discussion of the trip came up. I felt like Hannah's expression suddenly darkened. Hannah, did something happen at school? Tell Mom anything you want to talk about.
No, it's nothing.
Since Hannah responded like that, I didn't press further. During this time, I was busy with work, coming home late at night, drinking the liquor Stephen recommended, and falling into a deep sleep, so my conversations with Hannah had also decreased. Am I neglecting her too much lately because of my busyness? I have to engage more with Hannah during the family trip. I thought about such things. The day of the trip thus arrived. My husband drove us to our destination. We arrived at a seaside spa resort with a large scenic cliff nearby.
Since it's already late today, let's rest at the inn and do some sightseeing tomorrow.
Upon Stephen's suggestion, I headed to the public spa with Hannah. While we were bathing, Hannah spoke up.
Mom, can you sleep with me tonight without drinking alcohol?
Sure, I understand.
It's a promise. You can't drink alcohol, okay?
Since Hannah insisted, I promised. I won't drink. I had been drinking too much lately at my husband's suggestion, so I thought it was necessary to have a break day. When the meal was brought to the room, Stephen took out a bottle of alcohol he had brought from home.
Come on, we should drink at times like this. You've been working hard. I've prepared some good liquor.
Then Hannah gave me a look. No, Stephen, not tonight, okay? I'm tired, and I think I'll sleep well tonight.
I see. It's a shame, even though I prepared it with care.
Stephen reluctantly put it away. After that, we had dinner at the inn and spent the night as usual. When it was time to sleep, Hannah said,
I want to sleep with Mommy,
and slipped into my bed. She's still such a baby. Thinking that, I closed my eyes next to Hannah. I was tired, so I fell asleep right away. And then...
Mom, wake up, quickly!
I woke up to Hannah's voice. In my drowsiness, I checked the time on my bedside phone. It was 2 a.m. Hannah, what's wrong at this hour? Did you need to use the bathroom? In response to my question, my daughter tearfully said,
Mom, please, we need to escape from Dad.
Huh? Those shocking words completely woke me up. Looking over to the next bed, I realized my husband wasn't there. What do you mean? Escape from Dad? What's going on?
Never mind that. Hurry! We have to escape from here.
Hannah's face was pale, her expression deadly serious. In light of her unusual demeanor, I decided to trust her and immediately got up. Then, hastily packing our belongings, I took Hannah's hand and left the inn. Fortunately, there was a taxi nearby, so we took it to a station a little distance away. During the ride, Hannah's hand was trembling. Arriving at the station, while waiting for the first train, I started talking to Hannah. Hey, Hannah, can you talk to me? Why did you say escape from Dad? After a moment of silence, my daughter spoke.
I had a dream. Dad was pushing Mommy off a cliff. It was near the cliff by the inn.
Huh? Indeed, Hannah sometimes has premonitions, but this seemed too far-fetched. That's impossible, Hannah. You just had a scary dream. When I tried to dismiss it, she shook her head.
It's not just that. I woke up in the middle of the night before. I heard Dad on the phone in his office.
On the phone?
Yeah, Dad said something on the phone. He said, I'm going to get rid of that woman soon. Look forward to it. We'll get married during the trip.
What?
And that's not all. He said, I love you, Irina. Isn't it strange for Dad to say I love you to someone other than you, Mom?
With tears in her eyes, Hannah looked at me.
But I thought I misheard it, so I didn't tell you, Mom. But today I dreamed that you were thrown off a cliff. I don't want Mommy to go away.
Saying so, my daughter burst into tears and clung to me. While holding her, I was shocked. Is my husband trying to kill me? And who is Irina? If what Hannah says is true, I can never forgive that man. It's okay. It's okay, Hannah. Calm down. Mommy is here with you, Hannah. Then my daughter said,
Mom, here,
and handed me something. While she said that, I took it from her hand.
It's okay. Mommy is okay, so I can go get some sleep.
With that, my daughter seemed relieved and began to doze off. Taking advantage of that, I sent a message to my husband. I received a message saying my mother at home was injured, so I brought Hannah to my parents' house hastily. I planned to stay there for a few weeks. There was no response for a while, but after Hannah and I boarded the first train, I received a reply from my husband.
Did that happen while I was taking a little walk at midnight? Please give my regards to your mom. Since I'm here, I'll do some sightseeing before I come back.
It seemed Stephen didn't suspect us at all, so I took Hannah and returned to my parents' house as I announced. My family at home was surprised to see us appear in the morning, but seeing my determined expression, they seemed to understand something and warmly welcomed us. After leaving Hannah with my parents, I began to take action. I asked the investigative agency to look into Stephen's background, and just 1 week later, the investigation results came back. The results were damning. It turns out that when Stephen returned from the trip, he had been bringing a woman to the house and spending time with her. The woman's identity turned out to be Irina, and she was a secretary at the company he worked for. Upon seeing those investigation results, I couldn't help but smirk. 3 weeks after Hannah and I fled from the spa resort, I headed alone to the house where he was. Then Stephen noticed me and looked up.
Oh, you're back. How's your mother doing? Huh? Where's Hannah?
Upon hearing this from my husband, I quietly replied, Stephen, please let's divorce.
Huh?
He seemed momentarily taken aback, but then quickly smirked, a reaction I didn't miss.
I see. So, Susan, you're being cruel, abandoning a husband with depression. But if you want a divorce, I guess there's no choice. But in return, there are conditions.
Conditions?
Oh, we'll have to handle the division of assets properly. We have $200,000 in savings, so you'll give me $100,000, right? Otherwise, I won't agree to the divorce.
Division of assets, huh?
Even though I had depression, I still did the housework and was a good husband, right? Since you're ditching your husband like that, it's only natural.
At that moment, I dropped a bomb on Stephen, who shamelessly said such things. But shouldn't it be you who pays?
Huh?
Then I threw the photos I got from the private investigator at him. The photos showed him entering hotels with his mistress and inviting her into our home.
Hey, what's this?
I hired a private investigator on you. You were cheating, weren't you? And your mistress is that woman, Irina, right?
Ugh.
Stephen was at a loss for words. Cheating would have been bad enough, but I never imagined you'd go as far as trying to kill me.
Huh?
This time, Stephen was visibly taken aback, and gradually his face began to turn pale.
Ooh, what's that? What do you mean I'm targeting your life?
At that point, I confronted him with a large amount of additional evidence. Among them were screenshots of WhatsApp messages exchanged between my husband and his mistress. Shall I read it aloud for you? Finally, tomorrow it will be done. Today, as usual, I'll give her alcohol spiked with sleeping pills. So the reason you used to give me alcohol regularly was to meet her at night or talk on the phone? Let me continue reading. With the effects of the sleeping pills remaining, I'll push that staggering fool off the cliff. The police will think it's an accident. Wow, Stephen, you're brilliant. This is conclusive evidence. Since Stephen remained silent, I continued reading aloud. Here's the follow-up message on WhatsApp. Even though she didn't take the bait at the end, the plan to push her off remains the same. Then we can finally be together. With the insurance money coming in at $300,000, it's something to look forward to.
Why would you have something like that?
I discreetly confronted your cheating partner, Irina. To be honest, I told her I wouldn't involve the police if she confessed. She was shaken and immediately handed this over to me. At that point, Stephen began to tremble and muttered,
So that's why I couldn't reach her.
There's enough evidence that you were targeting my life. Just give up already.
Sending something like that is just a joke. Doesn't prove anything.
At that moment, I pulled out something from the inn we were staying at and confronted him with it. It was the bottle of alcohol that Stephen had tried to make me drink that day. If I have the police investigate this, the truth will come out, you know.
Stop that. I don't want to get caught. If it comes to this, right here and now, I'll...
Stephen shouted and tried to grab me. Since you walked in, I've had my phone connected to my lawyer. They're outside the door, so if you try anything, they'll burst in here immediately.
What?
That's when I cut to the chase with him. I don't want to label Hannah's father as a criminal, so I won't involve the police. But in return, be prepared, because I'll squeeze out hefty compensation and child support from you. You scumbag! Don't you dare show up in front of us ever again! Stephen seemed to realize there was no way out and collapsed on the spot. Later, Stephen and I divorced. I, of course, got custody of Hannah and was able to win higher than market rate alimony and child support. Property division naturally didn't occur, and I inherited all of the shared savings. Subsequently, I demanded compensation from Irina, the woman he cheated on me with. Initially hesitant, she paid the compensation in full at once when I threatened to involve the police. Eventually, it seemed Stephen and Irina broke up. Stephen, having exhausted his savings on payments to me, ended up burdened with debt. He vanished, accepting the condition I set forth, to move far away and never appear before us again. I don't know what became of him afterward, but it's certain he's leading a miserable life. On the other hand, with the compensation, I moved with Hannah and started a new life. Perhaps due to her growth, my daughter's peculiar remarks have completely disappeared. As a result, she has made new friends at her new school and seems happy every day. I look forward to my daughter's growth and want to live positively from now on. Thank you for watching until the end. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
My father-in-law passed away suddenly. It's because you didn't take good care of him. My husband is gone because of you. I'm sorry. Apologizing won't bring him back. You're going to pay for this. Large drops of tears are falling out of my mother-in-law's eyes. It's such a deliberate and exaggerated act on her part. If you're really sorry, at least get down on your knees and beg for forgiveness. Yes, I'm very sorry. I kneel in the middle of the funeral home, while many people look on and whisper to each other. Then, her cell phone starts ringing.
It's me, Mom.
My husband's familiar voice came out of the speaker.
I just finished burning all the evidence. I still need to erase all the emails, and then I'm going home. I'm glad the old man is gone so easily. I can't believe it went so well. The old man and Lucy are idiots.
Hush, Daryl! My mother-in-law scurries to cover the speaker of her phone, but it's too late. I stand up and take a step toward her. They dug their own graves in front of such a large crowd. How stupid are they? Her fake tears have already dried up, and she's flustering. It's not what you think. I don't know who it was. It must be a wrong number. Oh, darn it. Her ugly true color is revealed now. I think to myself, smiling at her in panic. Now, my father-in-law and I would begin our retaliation, putting everything on the line. The story goes back some time ago. I was a housewife who was turning 40 that year. To make a little extra for the family, I worked part-time at a local supermarket in my spare time. I married my husband Daryl 10 years prior to the incident, and we had no kids. My in-laws lived a 15 minutes walk from our house. We planned to live together sometime in the future, as they were getting quite old. Daryl and my mother-in-law Carol were very kind to me when we first got married. As the years went by, they became more and more difficult to deal with. Daryl started complaining about my cooking, which he had enjoyed once those days. If I served him something he didn't like, he threw away the food without even taking a bite. He also looked for places that had not been cleaned well and scolded me. Carol came over every day to criticize me for everything. Then she looked in my refrigerator and took food home without asking me. I once asked Daryl to do something about her, but he told me to let her be as she was my family. Not only that, he even ordered me to cook for her. I had been frustrated and sad, but I had no one to rely on. My parents had already passed away when I was in university, and I had no close relatives. I had no particular qualifications and had only been working part-time since I got married. I had no confidence in my ability to live on my own if I got a divorce. There was no choice but to endure. They knew what I was thinking. Whenever I showed even the slightest hint of defiance, Daryl said,
I have no problem getting rid of you anytime.
He threatened me with a divorce. The only person who had been kind to me was my father-in-law, Morgan. He required nursing care, and I made time between my job and housework to take care of him. Carol had told me, I'm just as old as he is. It's not right to make me take care of him. It's the daughter-in-law's job, isn't it? You are part of the family, so you should at least help us. She turned her back on him and busied herself with her own things. Caring for Morgan had never been a burden for me. He enjoyed the food I cooked for him and was always humble and appreciative when I helped him with personal care. The time I spent with him was more like therapy for me, which had become an important part of my life. I enthusiastically went to him every time. Then one day, Daryl asked me to go for lunch with him. I was dubious about his invitation, which I had not received in many years, but I was thrilled. He said that Carol was watching Morgan, so I went out. It turned out to be a bad idea. I should never have gone out, no matter what Daryl said. While I was out, Morgan suddenly passed away. I was completely stunned, but there was no time to grieve. Daryl and Carol put all the blame on me.
It's because you haven't been taking good care of him.
That's right. If you had taken care of him every day, none of this would have happened.
We left him in church, but what have you been doing? How could he have died so suddenly?
How terrible! I was repeatedly scolded by them. Besides, they refused to go through the hassle of preparing for the funeral, etc., and I ended up taking care of all the formalities. On the day of the funeral, Morgan used to own a small business and volunteered in the community before, so a lot of his business connections and acquaintances gathered at the funeral home. They all expressed their regret for him, and many were in tears. I watched them as if I were dreaming. Then suddenly, Carol's phone started ringing loudly. In the quiet funeral home, it echoed uncomfortably. Carol panicked and pressed the speaker button by mistake. The ringing stopped, but now the caller's voice came out at high volume. The sound was very familiar to me. It was Daryl. He said there was a job he could not hold off and went on business trip, ignoring his father's funeral.
Hello, Mom. It's me.
Wait, Daryl,
What? I'm destroying the evidence now. It's all going well.
Hey, wait!
Lucy's not so bright. She has no idea. We will split the $200K insurance money as promised. I'm going to head back to you soon.
The family members and the attendees started demanding explanations and closing in on her. The relatives called Daryl, who was supposedly on a business trip, and asked him to come to the funeral home right away. At first, they were evasive, saying they knew nothing about it. However, the angry relatives were so fierce that they were forced to come clean about their plan. Morgan was feeling a little under the weather a few days before his death. It was only a little cold and nothing serious. The doctor even said he was going to get better as long as he ate and slept well. It was something that would heal quickly if he was well taken care of. In fact, he was getting better little by little after taking the prescribed medicines. Daryl and Carol had noticed that he was not well. Daryl lured me out so that I wouldn't have to take care of him and hoped that he would fade away. It was all for the insurance money. It was Carol who came up with the idea, and the two of them had been emailing about their plan. They planned to blame me for not taking good care of Morgan and just taking the money. Daryl used the business trip as an excuse and was actually busy burning the medications and notes I kept on Morgan's condition every day and erasing all the emails correspondences. When I finished hearing their story, I was burning with anger. Morgan was gone just because of their greed. I managed to calm myself and walked up to them. In fact, I had known the exchange between them. I looked into Daryl's phone that was left in the living room once. I honestly had no intention of doing so, but I was bothered by the non-stop beeping of incoming mail. I just wanted to pass it to him when I accidentally tapped the screen and saw the contents. To say that I was shocked was an understatement. I couldn't believe they were planning such an atrocity for money. I kept my composure and immediately consulted Morgan. After talking it over, we both agreed that there would surely come a day when they would not allow me to take care of him. We decided to hire a helper whom I knew, just in case that they came. On the days when I could not visit him, I would ask her to take over. She was supposed to visit him on the day I went out for lunch. I was told later that she did come, however. He doesn't need a helper. I would never let a stranger come into our house. She was yelled at by Carol and was turned away. She had no choice but to leave without checking on him. During the discussion with him, we came up with a few ideas. I decided to record him in case none of them worked. I grabbed the voice recorder and stood in front of Daryl and Carol. They looked away from me as if I was sore in their eyes. I had known what they were planning, but I'd been hoping it was all a joke. When I actually heard the two of them talk about it, my brain started to boil from shock and anger. They seemed to be feeling more uncomfortable rather than guilty, which infuriated me even more.
What the hell do you want?
I have a message for you from Morgan.
What message?
Ignoring the confused look on Daryl and Carol, I pressed the play button on the voice recorder. Morgan coughed a few times and then slowly begins to speak.
The fact that you are hearing this means that the plan worked out the way you wanted to. I'm sure you must be very happy with the way things turned out, but too bad for you. I've already canceled my life insurance a long time ago. You put everything on Lucy's shoulders and don't even show your faces to me. On top of that, you have been ungrateful and giving her a hard time even though she has been working so hard. I have nothing to give or leave to such horrible people.
True to his word, he had already terminated the insurance policy. No matter how many times I asked him if he was sure, he said,
"Don't worry."
He sounded somewhat forlorn and proceeded with the procedure without any hesitation. So that's that. He knew about your plan. The insurance has been cancelled for a long time now. There's no such thing as insurance money.
No way! You're lying. You just made him say those things.
Yeah, it's all your lies, isn't it? Believe it or not, it's up to you. You can contact that insurance company, but even if he kept the contract, I doubt that you will receive the money after you've spoken about the plan so much. They looked at each other in surprise. By the way, I recorded what you two said earlier. After committing such a sin, I hope you are going to tell me again that I should forgive you guys. They hung their heads down in silence, as if they had given up. I called the police, and they were taken away without resistance. I was quite busy sorting out the remaining matters of Morgan, and with the police interviews after that. Daryl and Carol had avoided criminal charges. However, their atrocity had been circulated in various circles, and they were shamed everywhere they went. Daryl was told by his boss that his presence would affect the company's reputation, and was removed from the project he had been overseeing. Although it was in the form of voluntary resignation, he was eventually fired. He has been having a hard time finding a new job because of his reputation. Carol has also been distanced from her circle of friends, and the neighbors have pressured her to move out. She has been denied a renewal of her rental agreement and has been forced to relocate. I filed for a divorce immediately after the funeral. I wasn't able to come to terms with it for a long time, but after the incident and what Morgan left with me, I finally made up my mind. There was another message from him on the voice recorder. It was addressed to me, which I did not find until after the funeral.
Dearest Lucy, thank you so much for everything you have done for me. I sincerely apologize that they have forced such a big responsibility on you to take care of me. But since I haven't been able to go out, I really look forward to spending time with you. I am blessed that such a kind person like you became part of my family. I have nothing but gratitude. I am so sorry that I could not protect you from them. You can go anywhere and live any way you want, so don't give up. I want you to choose a path that will allow you to live your life with a smile on your face.
Such was the message. It made me burst into tears. He was right. I was tired of my life, and before I knew it, I had given up. I was convinced that it was the only way. Morgan was right about choosing my way. Without Daryl, and even all alone, I could continue living. I wanted to fulfill his last wish. I immediately filed for divorce and moved out of the house. I continued to work part-time at the supermarket for the time being while looking for a full-time job. I was so anxious about my life on my own, but I now feel like I have a bright future. I'm going to start my way of life from now on.
I have been paying off my husband's debt, and my mother-in-law pushes me even further, but it was for one of my mother-in-law's plans.
You only make this much. How can you have only $30,000 in savings?
My husband yelled at me and threw a wine glass against the wall.
Glenn is right. Go make some money, Ashley.
And my mother-in-law blames me too.
I can't take it anymore. I understand. I'll leave this house.
My name is Ashley. I'm a 35 years old office worker. I married my husband, Glenn, 2 years ago. I met Glenn on a blind date. He was a young, handsome man working for a big company. He was popular among women because of his looks. For some reason, he approached me aggressively.
I feel at home when I'm with you, Ashley. Let's go out to dinner next time.
He came on to me like that, and I was attracted to him, even though I was shy. It was my first time dating someone younger than me, but I really enjoyed dating a man who had the heart of a boy, but took the lead. And after a year of dating, he proposed to me, and we got married. Looking back, I wish I had thought about it more carefully before we got married. But I loved him so much, and I think I was too excited to get married. They said love is blind, and I guess it really is. And then we started our life together. We greeted each other's parents, had a wedding, and became husband and wife.
You know I can't cook or clean, so you do all the work, okay?
What? But we both work. I want you to share some of the work.
I said I can't, so take it.
Then, can't you at least do the laundry?
No, I can't. I can't.
No matter how much I told him, he stubbornly refused to do the chores. So no matter how busy I was at work, I had to come home and do everything. Plus, he complains about my chores.
Come on, you know what time it is. I'm starving. Get the food ready. Now.
I'm sorry. Give me a minute. I work late and often come home at around 8. But my husband doesn't do anything. He just waits for me to come home. And yet, he complains to me all the time.
I'm tired from working. Why do I have to go hungry?
I'm tired too. Working overtime, you know.
What? What did you say?
What?
No, I didn't say anything.
The moment I married to my husband, he became very strict with me like that.
Hey Ash, put more protein on the menu, okay? I told you to have different dessert every day.
He complains about the food like that. He also complains about the way I clean the house and do the laundry.
I don't like the way you fold my clothes. Why can't you fold them nicer? It was like that right after we got married. After about 6 months, I got used to his attitude. At that time, I wasn't thinking about divorce. I still loved him, even though he was acting like that.
I also thought he loved me.
Over time, I learned to anticipate his demands, so he didn't complain too much.
2 years have passed since living like that. I thought it would be nice to have children someday soon. But then, something unexpected happened.
Ashley, can you lend me some money?
What? What's wrong?
You don't have any money before payday? No. It's not like that. It's just, I have a debt. What? What do you mean? Well, I failed in the margin trading of stocks. What? Stocks? It seemed like my husband lost a lot of money on the stock market and in debt. Wait a minute. How much? About $80,000. $80,000? I felt dizzy and almost collapsed. I couldn't keep my mouth shut because the debt was more than I expected. Why did you get into the stock market in the first place? Well, I heard my friend made a lot of money. I thought maybe I could do it too. But how are you going to pay back your debt? It's gonna be you and me. I was completely appalled. I was going to save up for our future, Well, then first, we'll have to move. What? No, I don't want to. I love it here, What are you talking about? The rent is too high. We can't afford to live here with the debt. We'll have to move to a cheaper place. What? No, we don't have to do that. Yes, we'll have to. And we have to save money on food and... Wait, come on, Ashley. You don't have to go that far. We'd been living on the lap of luxury because we were both working. But now that we are in so much debt, we can't afford to live like this. When I told him that we are going to move out, he proposed. Okay, then we can move into my parents' place. That way, we don't have to pay rent, right? What? That's a little... What? You don't like it? Why not? It was your idea to move, right? I'm against moving in the first place. So we can either stay here or go to my parents' house. How can a man in debt be so stubborn? I said to myself. Fine. Then let's move in with your parents. I had no choice but to agree to live with my in-laws. Mom, Dad, thanks for having us. Welcome back, son. And you too, Ashley. Thank you. We appreciate your help. My in-laws welcomed us warmly. I have only met them a few times so far, so I didn't know them very well yet. I was afraid that they might bully me or hate me. As it turned out, my in-laws weren't like that at all. They treated me fairly normally, and they never complained that I had a job. They don't force me to do housework either. My mother-in-law was a full-time housewife and took the lead in the housework, which was nice because it meant less work for me. But my husband's attitude was the same as ever. Ashley, why do you always make Mom do all the housework? You're my wife. Then you should do all the work. That's what my husband blamed me for. At the time, my father-in-law warned him for me. Hey, son, how dare you talk to your wife like that? Ashley always works later than you. So why don't you help her with the housework yourself? I felt a little better when my husband was outspoken against my father-in-law, because my husband was always unreasonably angry with me. It was rare for me to see him like that. I thought living with my in-laws might be difficult for me, but it turned out to be more comfortable for me than I expected. But it didn't last long. My father-in-law became ill, and soon after he passed away. My mother-in-law, my husband, were all devastated. I couldn't believe that my father-in-law, who was so kind to me, had passed away. At the funeral, I was so sad that I couldn't stop crying. After losing my father-in-law, a new life with the three of us started. And my husband, with my father-in-law gone,
was becoming more and more like he used to be.
What the hell?
No dinner yet? Again?
Hey, give me the money for this month. Come on.
My husband was demanding $1,000 from me to pay off his debts every month. As a couple, I wanted to pay off my husband's debt as soon as possible, so I let him. But still, every time I handed him the cash, I felt like I'd done something wrong, and I hated it. After about a year of living like that, my husband suddenly asked me how much money I had in savings.
So, how much money do you have in your savings?
What? Why all of a sudden?
Well, I wanted to pay off all my debts.
I see. I don't know. Wait a minute. Here. I showed him our online bank account. That's about it. Soon, he looked at me with wide eyes and got angry.
Hey, you only make this much.
How can you have only $30,000 in savings? I give you $1,000 a month, remember? I think I rather did a good job saving this amount of money.
Shut up. Don't talk back to me. I still have debt.
So go make some more. Then my husband yelled at me and threw a wine glass against the wall. The glass hit the wall and broke into pieces. With the wine, the floor was wet and stained. I was stunned. Then my mother-in-law opened her mouth. Glenn is right. Go make more money, Ashley. My mother-in-law also accused me. I couldn't believe it. That even my mother-in-law would take my husband's side and say such a thing to me. Glenn, it's not safe if you get hurt. So go out and have dinner until we finish cleaning, my mother-in-law said, and gave my husband a $100 bill.
Okay. Thanks, Mom. I shall do so.
My husband said that and walked out. Maybe this is it. This is my limit. I can't stay in this place anymore. Just when I thought that, my mother-in-law came up to me. What in the world is she going to say to me? Ashley, are you okay? Are you hurt? I'm sorry. Such a hopeless son. My mother-in-law looked very sad. Ashley, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't let Glenn take your money away like that. You should run away from this. I'll help you, okay? What? But what about you? I'm going into nursing home. I'll have my pension and my husband's inheritance. So, you don't have to worry about me, okay? Just think about your future, Ashley. I burst into tears, knowing that my mother-in-law was on my side, and I knew she was right. I had to protect myself. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I will leave this house. Then we both put away the glasses that my husband had broken and cleaned the floor. After a while, my husband came home tipsy. The next day, I saw him off to work and packed my things. I called the company and asked for a half day off from work. Then I booked a business hotel and decided to stay there for a couple of nights for the time being. Thank you for everything. I never forget your kindness. No. It's okay, Ashley. You take care. I said goodbye to my mother-in-law and left my in-laws' house. When I was relaxing at the hotel, I received a call from my husband.
Hey, where are you? Come home and cook dinner. It's past 8 o'clock.
I replied with a sigh. I'm sorry, but I'm not going back there.
Huh? What are you talking about?
I'm saying that you and I are getting a divorce.
Huh? Divorce? You gotta be kidding me. I won't allow you to do that.
I don't care if you allow me or not. I know you are having an affair. With my word, my husband sounds upset.
What? I'm having an affair? Do you have any proof?
After you broke the glass yesterday and left the house, your mother showed me pictures to prove it. She saw you walking with a woman not too long ago. And so, she hired a detective to investigate. They got the results just a few days ago. So I can get a divorce. And you're the one to blame. I'm going to charge you more alimony than the $1,000 a month I've been giving you.
What the hell?
I mean, the $1,000 you were getting from me, you were using it for your lover, right? That's why you always wanted cash, didn't you? But now we have all the evidence. You can't get away with it. We'll have to go through a lawyer.
Wait a minute.
I ignored my husband's words and hung up the phone. After that, my husband and I were able to get a divorce. Alimony was paid, both by my husband and his lover. My mother-in-law cut off the relationship with him and went into a nursing home. My ex-husband lost his home and his family. He now spends his days renting a shabby apartment and paying his debts and alimony. I heard he was dumped by his girlfriend because he was living like that. I think he deserves it. I, on the other hand, am living in a condo, and I'm very comfortable with my life. My job is going great. I visit my ex-mother-in-law once in a while. She's the one who helped me leave my husband. She was there for me when I was going through a tough time, and I am grateful for that. I'm sure that my ex-mother-in-law must be feeling lonely somewhere in her heart now that she's separated from her son. I will continue to visit her regularly, and I will never forget my gratitude toward her. And I will continue to live my life as I am. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you like. See you in the next video.
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law wouldn't let me attend my father-in-law's funeral, who I've been a caregiver. Then my husband did something unexpected.
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law got furious at me, even though I was the one who took sole responsibility for my father-in-law's care.
You were not part of this family. You don't get a seat at the funeral. You are a housekeeper, so work behind the scenes.
And they continue with grins on their faces. Don't worry, we'll pretend we took care of Dad. That way, you don't have to worry about being accused for your shabby work as a caregiver. I can't believe it. What they said and did leave me speechless. My name is Alyssa. I'm 46 years old. I work part-time as a professional caregiver. My husband, Calvin, is an IT engineer. We have a son, but he left home when he got a job. We had just passed a minor milestone in raising our child, and now we were ready to take a breather. At that time, our family was shaken by a terrible event. My father-in-law had a stroke and needed nursing care.
I can't take care of him. My legs and back are too weak, you know?
My mother-in-law called my house to ask for help. My husband has a sister, Doris, who lives alone. If my mother-in-law can't take care of him, it should be either my sister-in-law or us. Soon after, we had a family meeting. We have a professional caregiver in the family, so it's a done deal, isn't it? My sister-in-law singled me out with a mean look on her face. I knew it would come to that. But that doesn't mean I feel comfortable discussing my job and taking care of my family members on the same level. On the other hand,
There were things I felt from the perspective of a caregiver. In my work, I have seen many families crumble between debts of gratitude to their parents and the hardships of caring for them. My father-in-law and I are not related by blood. I thought I might be able to separate the two in a way that blood relatives can't. Calvin, how about you? How do you feel about your father? I asked my husband right then and there, and he answered immediately. I owe my father everything for raising me to be a man. That's when I came to terms with my feelings. Then I will take care of him. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law replied with big smiles on their faces. Oh, really? Thanks. I felt sadness and anger at the way they spoke to me, as if it was a matter of course. And so my life as caregiver began. Well, as is common in any home, things happen day by day. Bathing, toileting, and midnight bell. I quit my job because I found it too difficult to take care of my father-in-law while working part-time. However, if I took on all the work alone, I would become exhausted and collapse sooner or later. So, I left him to daycare for a certain amount of time and tried to keep my mental health in check. But my mother-in-law and sister-in-law complained about the way I was taking care of him. It was so lazy to leave the care of my family to others. Doesn't it hurt you to ask someone else to take care of your family? My mother-in-law and sister-in-law have forced me to be the sole caregiver. No, I will be crushed if I keep doing this alone. I try to argue with them, but they must think I can afford it since I quit my job. In the eyes of the world, leaving him to another caregiver, even just for a few hours, would be something shameful. You heartless bitch.
Yeah, you'll go to hell if you treat your family like that.
I couldn't take any more of their invective. How can you say such a thing after forcing me to do everything? I have a limp, remember?
And I am busy with work, so I can't.
Both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law kept repeating their reasons over and over again. They never take care of my father-in-law, who is their husband and father. They were always like this, so they wouldn't even pay for the extra cost that I asked for. And in the end, while I was taking care of my father-in-law, I never heard a word of thanks from either of them. But that didn't mean that all my hard work went unrewarded. Alyssa, thank you for watching my dad every day. I really appreciate that.
My husband thanked me for everything. On his days off, he would take over the work for me. And sometimes he would even bring me my favorite sweets as a treat. These little rewards boosted my energy many times over. And so, my caregiving life continued for about 2 years. And the day came, as it always does. The day of farewell, of course, brings a lot of memories. Once he was gone, all the good things about my father-in-law came back to me, and I cried. On the other hand, I also felt relieved. What I can say out loud and what I can't say out loud are all coming together. It was with these mixed feelings that I attended the farewell ceremony. But what surprised me was the attitude of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law to the relatives who gathered there. They were talking about the last days of my father-in-law's life to everyone. Yeah, it was hard work. Take care of him at home, you know. But my husband was happy, even on his sickbed. They would talk things like that, as if they took care of my father-in-law. Thank you for taking care of him until the end. In response, the relatives thanked my mother-in-law and sister-in-law in such a way. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. At that moment, my mother-in-law walked toward me. It was a white marble floor, so the sound of her walking was very loud. My mother-in-law stopped in front of me and said, "What are you doing here?" "Wearing black." She almost grabbed me. "What? I'm here to say goodbye to him, of course." I tried to continue, but my mother-in-law shouted at me, "You don't get a seat at the funeral." And my sister-in-law, who came from behind my mother-in-law, continued, "Yeah, work behind the scenes, housekeeper. You are not supposed to be in the public eye, for God's sake." And she tried to push my shoulders. They both grinned at me and continued, "Don't worry. We'll pretend we took care of Dad. That way, you don't have to worry about being accused for your shabby work as a caregiver." What? I'm stunned by their words. "Because I'm too embarrassed to say that you left most of the work to the hired caregiver, right? So, don't worry. I'll pretend you weren't in charge of any of the work." They both burst into ugly laughter. I don't know what to do. I don't know anything anymore. I was almost shaking with despair and hopelessness. Then, my husband gently tapped me on the shoulder. "Don't worry, Alyssa. I'll take care of it." I turned and looked at him. I think I was crying without knowing. I could see him nodding his head over and over again. It came time for the funeral to begin. I kept my distance from my mother-in-law and stood beside the ushers at the entrance. The ceremony director greeted the guests.
The order of the ceremony will be changed a little.
His voice echoed throughout the hall, and there was a slight murmur in the room.
The mourner's address, which was to be given at the end of the ceremony, will now be given at the beginning of the ceremony,
he said, and handed the microphone to my husband. "Thank you for attending my father's funeral today." My husband began to introduce himself. "I am a son of the deceased, but I am not a chief mourner at this funeral." What? There was an uproar in the hall. "You are not a mourner?" Needless to say, the groans were filled with confusion. To my relatives, my husband is the eldest son, a true blood son. What is he saying? What is this? My husband continued, as if responding to their voice. "My wife was told this by my mother and sister, that my wife is not family, that she doesn't have a seat at this funeral, and she must work in the back as a housekeeper. If my wife is going to be treated that way, I'm prepared to do the same. I will not have anything to do with this family right here and right now." My husband's voice echoed through the hall, causing my mother-in-law and sister-in-law to panic. "Hey! What are you doing, Calvin?" My husband threw a cold stare at his mother and said, "Then, on what grounds did you say that my wife is not family?" The tone was harsh, and the mic howled a little. He continued, "How can you say you've been a great caregiver? You didn't even come once to check on Dad." What? It wasn't just my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. The whole place was abuzz with surprise. My wife took care of my father, alone. On top of that, my mother and sister didn't even help us financially. They just pushed their daughter-in-law to do the job. Here's the record." My husband took out his smartphone and revealed his father-in-law's caregiving notes that my husband and I had shared. The notes clearly showed how I took care of him. Alyssa did her best to change the flavor of the liquid diet each time so that the menu did not overlap. She also keeps a record of the numbers of times he defecates at night. She was concerned about my dad's constipation. My husband told everyone how I was taking care of him, reading out the notes. Now, no one believed that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were taking care of my father-in-law. My husband took this opportunity to tell them the whole story. My wife was told by both of them that hiring another caregiver was just a way of skipping out on her responsibilities. But if she had to take care of my father all day long, she would collapse. So I made arrangements. But my mother and sister said she was slacking off and wouldn't even pay for the cost. My mother-in-law refused this explanation. Because my daughter-in-law is a professional caregiver, isn't she? And my husband immediately cut her off. You admit what I say is true, don't you? Well, that's... My husband continued. You didn't do anything to take care of him, so it's easy for you to come off like a fool. My wife is not a volunteer or anything. I'm going to charge you a wage based on the hours she put in to take care of him. I want full payment. What? My mother-in-law and sister-in-law flinched at my husband's words. I have a limp. I couldn't.
I was busy working.
There was a chill in the air in the hall. The only ones who didn't notice were the two of them. And my husband spoke to the family members in attendance. They are the one who have no right to attend my father's funeral. What do you think, everyone? After a short silence, a man stood up. If Alyssa is not family, then I am not family either. He was the oldest man in the room. My father-in-law's brother. Huh? My mother-in-law gasped. I don't want to be considered a family, or even relatives, with the two. I'd like to be family with Alyssa, who did her best to take care of my brother. Then one of the women got up from her seat. I don't want them to think of me as a relative either. Now it's my father-in-law's niece. And one by one, relatives started to say they want to break the relationship with the two. My mother, who is my father's wife, and my sister, who is my father's daughter, are now strangers. And my wife is my true family, not these two. Our relatives in the audience answered my husband with applause. Thank you, Alyssa, for taking care of him till the end. It must have been very hard for you. The relatives who knew the truth now tried to comfort me. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you for everything. I held my husband's hand back as he reached out to me with tears streaming down on my face. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law sobbed as they left. And so, the farewell ceremony came to an end. Schumann's Stratmalai, my father-in-law's favorite music, was played in the hall. We also put his favorite wine bottle in the coffin. I hope you are at peace now. I know it has been a tough 2 years for you too. Thank you so much for raising such a kind husband. I bowed my head once more as I said goodbye to my father-in-law. I feel like I have grown as a caregiver since I saw my father-in-law off. I went back to work as a caregiver, from part-time to full-time, and was even promoted to manager. Every day, I listened to the complaints of new caregivers and the struggles of the families of those being cared for. On the other hand, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who were cut off from their relatives, moved far away because they couldn't stand the cold eyes of their neighbors. I probably won't see them again. My husband brought some flower seedlings to plant in the garden. Oh, bellflower? Your father used to love them. I looked up at the blue sky as I planted them. Thank you for watching till the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you like. See you in the next video.
My husband invites his mother to our trip at the last minute without asking. The trip ends like a hell.
I am used to making travel plans. So I researched the hotels and tourist spots on the internet and made reservations. However, the night before we were to leave, my husband said to me,
"Oh, yeah. Mom is coming with us on this trip. Okay."
I was surprised at the suddenness of the matter. What? I thought it would just be you and me.
I told you, didn't I?
He's got a nasty way of talking to me. I felt like he was doing it on purpose to annoy me. My name is Erin. I am a 32-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Otis for almost a year. And even though we're still newlyweds, I'm already under lots of stress. The cause was my husband. When we were dating, my husband was kind and gave me sweet words and lots of gifts. But as soon as we got married, his attitude changed drastically. I thought my job was worthwhile and I wanted to keep it. But Otis strongly encouraged me to quit.
It must be hard for you, Erin, to manage both the housework and your job. My earnings would be enough.
But the truth, he just wanted me to stay home and complete the housework. And that's not all. He would give me detailed comments about my cleaning and cooking. It was as if he was coaching me in some kind of sport. I am exhausted by his attitude every day. If I try to talk back to him, he gets very grumpy. Just looking at his face depresses me. His stories are long and he is very persistent. So recently, I have decided not to say anything to him anymore. I often sigh loudly when he is not around. Not only that, but he has become more and more restrictive with me. I need his permission to go out with friends. When I was single, I used to meet up with friends and colleagues several times a month. It is hard for me to remember my single days when I could eat delicious food and sweets at cafes and restaurants and chat as much as I wanted. In the first place, I had to leave the city where I lived because Otis and I got married. It's only a 2-hour drive, but I can no longer see my parents and friends easily. It's a rural area with lots of greenery, but very little in the way of entertainment, to say the least. It's not convenient for shopping, and I don't know anyone. The most painful thing for me is that I don't have enough money to live every month. According to the statements I was shown when we were dating, Otis's income wasn't that bad, but he loved to drink and could not give it up. That alone is a considerable monthly expense. He also liked to gamble and would spend his weekends and holidays in the casino from morning till evening. On days when he lost a lot of money, he would take it out on me. I'm fed up with it. On top of that, Otis was quite a mama's boy. My mother-in-law often came to our house unannounced. She checks every room in the house and gives me a sarcastic look. "Erin, you were not cleaning well again." My mother-in-law loves to tell me what to do, just like her son. Otis is such a mama's boy that he accepts whatever his mother says. He doesn't realize that I am having a hard time. My mother-in-law usually comes over for tea time. Then she happily spends the rest of the evening as she bullies me. After dinner, she occupies the sofa in the living room and watches TV lazily. During this time, I have to listen to her complaints, and it's a pain. After that, she finally goes home. But she can't drive, so I have to drive her home. I feel like throwing up just the fact that I have to listen to her talk about things I don't want to listen to. It was during this time that my husband suggested to go on a trip together. Did something good happen to him at work? I had no idea what was going on. Ever since I was a student, I have always loved taking day trips alone or traveling by train with friends. Being in an environment away from the daily routine, you can forget about the worries and stress of work. You can freely enjoy unfamiliar scenery and food. When I think about it, we don't even have a honeymoon because Otis, who is an indoor person, didn't want to go. So when he suggested the trip, I was excited. I hurriedly made arrangements. Or rather, I had to do it because Otis didn't seem to do anything. It's been a while since I've been on a trip, but I'm used to making travel plans. I looked up hotels and tourist spots on the internet, made reservations, and planned one thing after another. However, the night before we were to leave, Otis said to me,
"Oh, yeah. Mom's coming with us. Okay?"
The suddenness of it took me by surprise. What? I thought it was just you and me.
Huh? I told you, didn't I?
He's got a nasty way of talking to me. From what I have seen so far, I get the feeling that he's doing this on purpose to get me in trouble. I said back to my husband, "Well, we're in trouble then. You know, I have already made a travel plan. It's hard to cancel and rebook now, especially since it's the popular season. Last time I checked, most of the hotels were fully booked." Otis heard that and interrupted me in a mid-sentence. He seemed to be in a bad mood and suddenly became angry.
Huh? It's your fault.
Damn it.
I shouldn't have left it to you. Just rebook or do something. Right now.
Okay. I'll try. I immediately started searching on the computer, as if my grumpy husband was rushing me. Then he pushed me further.
Hey, this is your responsibility. You have to pay for the trip. Got it?
What? Hey, that's...
Don't talk back to me. This is a done deal. And if you don't like it, I'll divorce you.
My husband said in his most boastful manner. I've seen this happen many times, and I am tired of it. I had so many things I wanted to say, but I knew that if I did, I could get into trouble again. So I didn't. As I expected, all the reservations for the hotel were already made. When I finally found some place to stay, the guest reviews were terrible. I am sure Otis and my mother-in-law will complain if I did a bad job with the booking. I thought about what to do, and then decided. Around noon on the day of the trip, my mother-in-law arrived with a large and heavy-looking travel bag. It was unusual. She didn't call me and took a cab. I thought she must have been looking forward to it. My husband, smiling and laughing, greeted her at the front door. Then I said to them, "I'd like you to go on this trip alone, please?" "I'm not going." My husband was quite surprised. He thought I was going to apologize for the travel arrangements.
Hey, what the hell? What's that supposed to mean? Explain.
Erin, I've been looking forward to this. Well, I told Otis yesterday. I had to make a sudden change and couldn't book the hotel for the three of us. Erin, you are hopeless at everything you do, aren't you?
You had all the time and you couldn't even rebook the reservation?
As I had expected, they got sarcastic toward me. So I firmly told them, I had originally made reservations for 2 people, so it should be fine. Considering the check-in time, I think you should leave by now.
Huh? I'm the one who decides when to leave.
Otis seems to be angry at me for expressing my opinion, which is rare for me.
If you are not going, who's going to drive? Besides, who will take care of Mom?
He's right.
I need a lot of help, you know? I'm really tired of the attitude of these two. I guess they think I'm nothing more than a convenient housekeeper. I took a deep breath and cut them off. Otis, you can drive. Besides, I don't have a mother-in-law to take care of any longer. Otis looked at me with a blank stare. My mother-in-law, who was standing next to him, rolled her eyes and looked as if she didn't understand. They both looked dumbfounded, so I continued. To tell you the truth, our divorce has already been in process. What? Divorce? Otis was shocked and was at loss for words. But after a while, he stared at me. What? After your mistake in arranging this trip, you're lying to me? What the hell are you thinking? I kind of knew it, but you really are an idiot. Hearing that, my mother-in-law continues. Yes, a divorce? Quit the joke, Erin. My mother-in-law said with a slightly pale face. I'm sorry, but it's true. I said that clearly. In fact, Otis had threatened me with divorce many times. When he didn't like something stupid, he did. He seemed to have forgotten all about it, though. The other day, he wanted to threaten me so badly. He even filed for divorce. But I've done the paperwork too. So the divorce will be final soon. My husband's foolish plan to manipulate me has failed. He thought there was no way I could divorce him. I guess he didn't think I was capable of such a drastic thing as divorce, or even the idea of divorce. After a while, my mother-in-law said, Otis, let's leave her alone and go on our own. My mother-in-law is a sucker for luxury and fun, so I knew this would happen. And Otis seemed to agree with her. Yeah, you're right. Let's leave this idiot alone and go on a trip. Just you and me, Mom. She'll pay for everything anyway. So, let's enjoy it to the fullest. Maybe it was because he didn't have much time. Or maybe it was because he was in front of his mother. But Otis didn't show his usual overbearing attitude. Then both got into the car and drove off. I, on the other hand, was relieved. That evening, my phone started getting calls from Otis and my mother-in-law. I ignored them for a while, but they were too noisy, so I set my phone in silent. I was just busy packing up my things. When I finished packing everything, I left the house with one suitcase and my purse. It was a house I lived in, but to be honest, I don't have a single good memory of it. I felt refreshed when I stepped out of the house. The destination was my hometown. I'm going to stay with my best friend Gabby for a while. Gabby welcomed me with open arms. We cooked together and talked like we used to, and I felt very relaxed. On the other hand, Otis and his mother had a bad time on their trip. The staff at the hotel was very rude, and Otis seemed to have lost his temper. The room had a small old bathtub with a musty smell, and the water pressure in the shower was too weak. My mother-in-law, who loves spas and is very particular about what she does, was very dissatisfied with this. Dinner was not included. Otis took a wrong turn and arrived late, so all the restaurants were closed. So they had no choice but to buy food from the vending machines. The next morning, my mother-in-law was excited about the buffet, but she was disappointed to find that it was just frozen food quality. They had a lot of bad-mouthing each other at the hotel, and there was a lot of fighting. On the way back, my husband hit the car in front of him because he was looking aside while driving. Although they were not seriously injured, both of them got whiplash. In addition, when the other man yelled at Otis, Otis lost his temper and retorted in his usual tone. This led to a lawyer's case. The other man's car was a brand new car and very shiny. And because it was a rare car model, he was going to have to pay a lot of money. I had no idea that a car accident would happen. But the hotel that I had rearranged without telling the two of them was... Yes, I deliberately chose a place that seemed to be of poor quality based on the reviews. By the way, the first room I booked was a luxury room with a jacuzzi with a night view. I wanted to beat them a little at the end of our relationship. I deserved it, considering the countless ways my husband and mother-in-law have treated me. They called me on my phone an unbelievable number of times when they found out I wasn't home. I had no choice but to answer my husband's call. Otis seemed to be very angry about the hotel. Whoa, was it really that old? And with such bad service? I didn't see anything wrong when I made a reservation. I just responded and didn't pay any attention to what he said. Otis's voice lacked its usual vigor. Even so, he was still trying to put words of the blame on me. But strangely enough, I was able to ignore them. After only a few days away from Otis and my mother-in-law, I was feeling much better. Reading was my hobby, and for the first time in a long time, I went to the library and purchased the books at the bookstore. The delicious home-cooked meals that my best friend Gabby and I prepared together also cheered me up. Besides, I can sleep peacefully every night. My mind is calm and I can't let most things pass me by. Gabby and my parents were also happy to see my change. As planned, I asked the Otis to pay me for all the horrible things he had said and done to me over the years. I never once did anything terrible. I was just doing what I thought was best for my stupid wife. I'll never pay you anything. At first, my husband was very stubborn and insistent. To my surprise, he even wanted to marry me again. Well, not exactly. I may consider marrying you again, depending on your attitude. He was talking in his usual spurious way. But, of course, I absolutely refused. After listening to his arguments, I opened my mouth. Well, this isn't going to work, so I'm going to apply for mediation. And I will hire a lawyer. As soon as I said that, my husband became quiet, and he showed some reluctance to comply with my request. I think that the issue of our divorce combined with the car accident must have been too much for Otis to handle. Sometime after the divorce, I was able to return to my former job. I am very grateful to my kind boss for making this happen so smoothly. The office is clean. My colleagues are nice and inviting as before. I was feeling rather like I could spread my wings. After a while, I found a nice apartment near the office and started living on my own. I told my best friend Gabby my gratitude, and that I would see her whenever I wanted to, and she was happy to send me off. Time flies. Recently, my boss and friends who knew my situation approached me about a blind date, which I appreciate, but I am busy with work right now. Although the memories have faded, I still sometimes remember the painful days with my ex-husband and mother-in-law. So I am thinking that until I can get my feelings in order, I am not to fall in love or get married for the time being. However, I have decided that I will not give up and will not forget to improve myself until I meet a wonderful match someday. Thank you for watching to the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you like. See you in the next video.
My name is Heather. After graduating from college, I landed a full-time job at a cafe. The company I joined had branches all over the country, and I had to relocate to various places regardless of the season or duration. In my 6 years of working there, I moved 3 times. While everyone around me was getting married, I remained single, and my parents started worrying about my future, asking, "Do you plan to stick with this job forever?" One day, while I was at the bar, I happened to run into Anna, a regular customer. I was venting my concerns about marriage during our conversation, and she suggested, "How about meeting my brother sometime?" I thought it was a joke because we had been drinking, but she was serious. The conversation progressed, and I ended up meeting her brother Mark. That was how we first crossed paths. Anna and I got along really well, and it was no difference with Mark, her brother. We started dating soon after, and around 6 months into our relationship, he proposed to me. I was overjoyed, but also overwhelmed by anxiety. Marrying him meant quitting my current job. Since his company didn't require any more transfers, I would be staying in one place. His family lived nearby, and his income could comfortably support both of us. So he wanted me to quit my job after marriage. It seemed like there was never an option for him to relocate for me. I also thought it would be challenging to continue my current job with irregular shifts, considering the possibility of having children in the future. Still, I couldn't help but feel reluctant to let go of what I had built up until now. I needed to make a decision. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then accepted the ring he offered. 13 years have passed since then, and I have spent those years regretting that decision almost every day. The first few years of our marriage seemed good, but everything changed after our son Ken was born. Mark became constantly irritable when he was at home, adopting an arrogant attitude. With me struggling with unfamiliar childcare and chronic sleep deprivation, household chores started piling up. At first, he said,
"I know it's tough."
But as time passed, his dissatisfaction grew. One day, after I fell asleep without waiting for him to return from a drinking outing, his attitude took a sharp turn. He looked down at me and said,
"Who do you think supports your life? You're only taking care of the child, and you laze around."
From that day onwards, he completely withdrew his cooperation in childcare, making it a one-woman show. With no family nearby, I couldn't ask for help. Ken's incessant night cries and my chronic lack of sleep caused headaches and dizziness. At times, I even considered going back to my parents' place, but I had made the choice to be with Mark and live in this town. I couldn't show weakness, so I held back. During those tough days, Anna and my in-laws became my pillars of support. Anna and I maintained a close relationship, even after I married Mark, and she visited us once a month since Ken was born. My in-laws also adored Ken, and they frequently visited our home, reading to him and playing with him. Their house was just a 15-minute drive away, so it was convenient. The house we lived in was a gift from my in-laws when I was pregnant. While I initially declined their offer, they explained that they had planned to purchase their barrier-free house from the beginning, considering our future together. Since they would eventually live with us, the house was under my father-in-law's name. While they looked after Ken, I could take care of the household chores, and chatting with my parents became a great way to relieve stress. I was very grateful for their visit. However, Mark felt differently. He didn't like the idea of his parents visiting, and indirectly express his disapproval. They got the hint, and they eventually stopped coming to our house. Despite this, they still invited me and Ken. Around the time Ken entered the 2nd grade, he expressed a desire to play Little League Baseball. He loved playing catch with his dad, and when he heard that one of his classmates had joined a baseball team, he wanted to as well. I had always wanted to let my child pursue their interests, but I couldn't immediately fulfill Ken's wish. Joining a baseball team required not only a membership fee, but also money for equipment, uniforms, and monthly fees. We didn't have the financial resources for it. Despite the fact that we should have been able to save a substantial amount each month with no rent and Mark's income, our savings were almost non-existent. Mark frequently went out drinking and spent money recklessly. Drinking itself wasn't an issue, but he wanted to show off, frequently inviting a few of his junior colleagues and covering their expenses. Ken wants to play Little League Baseball, I said, handing him a paper with the cost listed. Mark glanced at the paper briefly and replied,
How are you planning to come up with all that money? You know we don't have that kind of cash.
He said it with a cold tone. Anticipating his reaction, I decided to share what I had been thinking all along. I'm thinking about getting a job. He frowned unhappily, but reluctantly agreed as long as I didn't neglect the housework. 6 months after I started working, we finally saved enough money to let Ken join the baseball team. Although my responsibility increased with laundry and driving him to practices, Ken became more energetic and alive, practicing his swings, playing catch with friends, and constantly discussing baseball. Just seeing his smile made it all worthwhile. However, this new life brought its own set of problems. Mark didn't appreciate my income. I chose to work part-time at the same cafe I used to work at as a full-time employee. Even though I had been away for a while, I quickly advanced after finishing my training because I was familiar with the place. Mark didn't expect me to earn much during the short time Ken was at school. When he saw the numbers in my budget spreadsheet, he was astonished.
You're making this much?
He exclaimed. Yeah, but after setting aside money for Ken's baseball and future savings, there's hardly anything left, I explained. But he turned away and headed to his room without a word. From that point on, his attitude worsened rapidly. I was treated like a housemaid, and he frequently raised his voice at our son. He used divorce as a threat, and often said unreasonable things. But I knew my income alone wasn't enough to support Ken and I, so I had to comply with whatever my husband demanded to protect my son. Then, after nearly 2 years of Ken playing baseball, something happened. Mark took Ken's baseball bat and slammed it against the walls and floor, breaking it. It happened on my payday, and Mark was already in a bad mood. But that day, he seemed even angrier. As soon as he came home, he threw his bag, plopped onto the couch, and yelled,
Hey, where's dinner?
Since I was in the middle of preparing for the next day's youth baseball, I said, Hold on a second. Then he replied,
Who do you think is providing for us? And Ken can play baseball because of me. You must make me your first priority.
Startled by his loud voice, but also very annoyed by his previous words, I retorted, But I manage the baseball expenses with my salary. He fell silent, grabbed Ken's baseball bat from his bag, and started smashing it against the wall. I instinctively covered my head with my hands and shrank as small as possible. When the noise stopped, I cautiously opened my eyes to find a large crack in the bed lying in front of me, and he was glaring at me intensely, saying,
"Don't get cocky just because of some part-time job."
I looked at him and realized it was time to end it. My pain wasn't about ending the marriage. It was about the broken bed before me. The bed I had bought with hard-earned money in between my busy schedule. The bed Ken had cherished. To think I had spent over a decade with someone who would resort to anger like this left me feeling empty. Despite my mixed emotions, he continued,
"You won't really go through with a divorce. You will be the one in trouble if we divorce. I dare you,"
he said with a smirk, handing me over divorce papers. This wasn't the first time he has done this. In fact, he has done this countless times before. I never thought I would actually accept them, but this time, I took them without hesitation. Enough of being made a fool of. I gathered my essentials, my wallet, phone, and such, and left the house with Ken. As soon as we were out, I told Ken that if I went back to my parents' house after the divorce, he would have to quit the baseball team. Plus, there was no guarantee we could continue living as before. However, my son said, "Mom, it's not your fault. The one at fault is that guy," clearly angry at his father. Then he added, "I can play baseball anywhere, and when I enter middle school, I can join the baseball team." I thought he was still a small kid that needed my support, but I didn't realize he had grown up enough to say such things. I went straight to the city hall and submitted the divorce papers. Once they were accepted, I suddenly felt calm, but anxiety about what to do next overwhelmed me. Going back to my parents' house at this hour was difficult. Besides, I only had the bare minimum of belongings, and there were Ken's school, baseball, and my part-time job to consider. I didn't know where to start or what to do today. Sensing my anxiety, Ken said, "Why don't we go to Grandpa and Grandma's house?" I hesitated, thinking about relying on my in-laws after the divorce. But after much deliberation, I called them. I explained that I had divorced Mark and shared the reasons behind it, as well as my concerns about the future. My in-laws responded, "Come to our house right away." Upon arriving at their place, they apologized profusely. "We feel horrible for making you and Ken go through hard times because of our stupid son." She was in tears. After putting Ken to bed, I gave them the details of what had happened. Then Anna arrived, probably because my in-laws had invited her. She was angry, saying, "What a bonehead my brother is!" Both my in-laws and Anna sided with me and Ken, not with their son Mark. When I recounted everything that Mark had done and said in the past, and what happened today, my father-in-law raised his voice and said,
"Call Mark. We will straighten him out."
It was already close to 11 p.m., but Anna immediately called him and told him to come over. Perhaps because Anna, who was usually easygoing, used a stern tone, Mark didn't dare to resist. He arrived at my in-laws' place soon after. Their house had a large rectangular table with enough seating for 4 on each side. So Anna, myself, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law sat on one side, while on the opposite side, Mark sat alone, resulting in a 4-to-1 setup. When he arrived, he looked pale and nervous. My father-in-law, speaking in a calm but very low voice, asked Mark,
"Don't you have anything to say to Heather?"
Mark, trembling, replied,
"It's about me and Heather. It's none of your business, Dad."
Then, not only my father-in-law, But also my mother-in-law and Anna started berating him simultaneously.
Enough of this!
You apologize to Heather right now. Do you even realize what you have done? Suddenly Mark, who had been timid just moments ago, became assertive. He directed his anger at me and said,
You! Don't think you can act all high and mighty just because you have my family on your side. You can't survive on your own anyway. I might consider forgiving you if you apologize now.
He could have ended this mess if he had apologized. But despite this situation, he continued to look down on me, which left me speechless. There is no forgiving or turning back. I've already submitted the divorce papers. I confronted him with a dose of reality. His eyes widened in disbelief, and he shouted,
What? What the hell did you do?
He yelled and pounded his fist on the table. Then my father-in-law intervened, saying,
You are not the one to be asking that question. What the hell did you do to Heather and Ken?
He raised his voice even louder and emphasized,
We have heard everything.
In response, Mark glared at me and muttered,
You're despicable.
Then my father-in-law spoke again.
The despicable one is you. You look down on your own wife just because you're working, and you have left everything including Ken to her. You even make her work a part-time job, and you broke the vow that Ken treasured.
He raised his voice.
Dad, just shut up. No, I can stay quiet. Apologize to her.
This kind of back and forth between father and son continued for a while. Mark eventually grew impatient and said,
If Heather is so much better than your own son, why don't you just live with her? I can live on my own. I don't need anyone's help.
Hearing this, his father glared at him, saying,
All right then.
Mark hesitated for a moment and said,
Whatever.
Then, as if on cue, Anna happily chimed in. Well, maybe I should live with Heather too? Even my mother-in-law added, You should start preparing for the move. Seemingly supportive of Anna's idea. Mark was stunned by their responses, perhaps thinking his mother would stop Anna from moving in. He started getting flustered, saying,
Wait, you guys.
But then his father said,
What? You just said we could live with Heather.
He stammered.
Wait a minute.
But all three of them replied in union.
No, it's settled.
Finally realizing his situation, Mark turned to me as if pleading.
Can't you reconsider?
I coldly dismissed him, saying, There's no way I will reconsider, and brought up the topic of child support. He protested.
Why do I have to pay child support?
But his father promptly replied,
It's only natural that you will pay.
And he fell silent. I was surprised when his father later offered to put the house we had lived in under my name. Of course, Mark objected, saying,
So where am I supposed to live then? Give me this house if you are giving Heather that one.
However, his father insisted.
You said you could live on your own. We've already decided to sell this house. Since you can live on your own, you can figure it out yourself.
Then he delivered the final blow, saying,
If there is anything you need in the house, gather it by morning. Everything else will be disposed of.
And so, Ken and I, and what had now become my ex-in-laws, my ex-father-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, and Anna, began living together. Explaining this complicated situation to others is not easy, and it seemed like my parents thought I had gone crazy when they heard the story. But for now, we are managing to live well. Ken continues to go to school without transferring, and he's still on the baseball team, maintaining his usual lifestyle. I work as a contract employee with no relocations. Even if I have to wake up early or work late into the night, my ex-mother-in-law takes care of the housework and chores, so I'm grateful for that. Mark lost his place to live and rented an apartment, but now he has to pay rent and child support for Ken. He can't freely spend money as he used to. His juniors, who were once interested in him for his generosity, have left him, and it seemed like he's spending his mundane days just commuting between an empty home and work.